Hi, and welcome to Ladies of Another View on Back. And I'm joined here today with Emily and Jan.
Hi.
And I'm Patty. And today's show is really about being aware of what's going on and doing something about it. Because there's a lot going on that shouldn't be. And hasn't that always been the way the world is?
Absolutely. But if you know better, you should do better.
Yeah, we have somebody, our guests are going to help us to know better because we can't always know what's going on everywhere. And I want to introduce our first guest because she helps parents to know what is going on in school. Welcome to the show, Nicole Neily.
Thank you for having me.
She is the founder and president of Parents Defending Education. And I get Nicole's emails updating on some of the latest stuff going on in schools. Oh my gosh, I am so glad you are out there because we need a watchdog. I don't care, it wouldn't matter to me if it's a school down the street or in Washington or out on the West Coast. This stuff should not be happening to children. And unless we know about it, parents can't rise up, and they have a way of keeping things secret, don't they, Nicole?
Absolutely. We think that knowledge is power. And so if you know that something is happening in your backyard, then it gives you cover and it gives you a reason to act and to do something about that. And so that's why we want to empower people with both the knowledge about what's going on and then the tools to do something about it. Let's get off Facebook and get off Twitter and go make some change happen in our communities.
An email that recently caught my eye was the fact that some schools are saying that math is racist. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Sure. So this actually originated in the Pacific Northwest, and sadly enough, it actually was seems to have been funded by the Gates Foundation. But it is, the idea that math is racist, that showing your work in math class, getting the right answer, fixation on things like that it's a vestige of white supremacy culture. And personally, I really want like my aerospace engineers and the people who build my bridges to get the right answer in math class. But let's take a step back and think about the message that is sending our children, right? Because I'm sure the people who are pushing these lessons are still teaching their kids to do well in school, right? They're still telling them to get the right answer, to get good grades. And so, I think it's starting to set students up for failure in life, right? Because you get out into the wider world and certainly those expectations are there. But it also, we see in places like Oregon, which recently instituted something called graduation equity. They said you can get a high school diploma in the state of in Oregon without being proficient at all in reading, writing, or mathematics. So you can have a high school diploma in Oregon and not know how to read. They said that was, basically to benefit BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, persons of color. And I think, that's really sad and patronizing. You're giving the impression that you think those people can't do it. And so we're just going to lower the standards. And nobody wants their child to be told that we don't think you can get the right answer. And so we're going to lower the standards for you.
And then to act like they're doing it for them. We're doing this to help them rather than educate them, rather to find out what the problem is and bring them up to a high school level standard. We're just going to lower the standards and then we can pass them through. I would think that minorities would be outraged.
Yeah, there certainly are. We have a lot of first generation Americans from around the country who they come here, they say, I moved to America. I chose to come here. I knew what I was getting myself into. Don't tell my kid that getting the right answer in math class is racist. Teach my child calculus so that they can apply to MIT and have a better life for themselves. But people, this war on equity, we've seen states across the country abolish advanced math programs, AP classes in the name of equity. And that is not doing our country any favor. Like you said, let's lift people up. Let's give students the support they need to get into those classes and do well. But let's not abolish those altogether. That to me is absolutely the wrong approach.
So this week is National School Counselor Week. Look out. Tell me, what are some of the pitfalls in that?
Sure. I think about when I was in school, we had a pretty good relationship with my school counselor. We talk about what college you want to go to, what classes you need. And unfortunately, that's not what is taking place in many schools across the country, which is one reason we wanted to put it on people's radar. Anywhere from the National School Counselor Association to the National School Psychologists Association, the National School Nurses, the kinds of things that are on their website, the position papers they're putting out, it's steeped in anti-racism. It's steeped in gender theory. The National School Nurses actually have taken the position that students should be transitioned, if they're transgender or gender questioning, they should be transitioned behind families' backs. That's not, in my mind, the role of a school nurse. It's not the role of a school counselor to lecture my child about his original sin based on his skin color. Let's actually maybe keep some of these people out of our children's heads. And if any of us want our children to find specialized help, I'd like that to be done by a professional without the prying eyes of the state and, a school counselor doing it. It raises big questions because our students, our children have 6, 7, 8 hours a day in school. And every hour that they're spending talking about these issues are time that they're not making up the learning loss that our children have incurred over the past 2 years, which is monumental coast to coast.
A lot of the kids have kind of pushed some of these counselors away. There are some good ones out there. Just as a for instance, when my oldest child was going from grade school to middle school, she had dealt with some vaccine injury issues, and the counselor brought me in and said, now if you don't want this to follow your student all the way through high school, I can remove this from her file at this juncture so that she's not defined by it. So there are still some people out there that are doing good work, but anytime you say National Association of blank, then you're looking at a control issue, are you not?
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, there are great school counselors, just like there are great teachers out there, but it is a lot of these national associations that are trying to push down crazy top level policies that don't reflect local communities' values. And that's something that, we just want to put on people's radar. Do you know who is getting into your child's head? Because you should know, and you should be comfortable with that or not, but don't let that happen behind closed doors, because you as the parent, the buck stops with you and you deserve to know.
I sent you an article earlier today and I said, can we talk about this? And I'm sorry, I don't remember which date it was in, but there was a girl who, a grade school girl, and she had attempted suicide at the school. Twice. And I guess they didn't know about the second one until they caught her the second time. Then they found out she'd actually attempted it before. But she simply liked video games. Kids started saying, oh, maybe you're a boy, because boys like that. So she slowly goes through this brainwashing that the counselor spearheaded, and they give her a boy's name. They start calling her he, and shortly thereafter, she attempts suicide. But you could see there was a whole brainwashing going on. Have you seen that sort of thing going on?
We do, absolutely. We talk to parents across the country. I talked to a mom a few months ago in northern New York who had this going on. Her school actually had maintained 2 separate sets of medical records, had been calling the child by a different name. And it was only a guilty teacher that reached out to the parent and said, you should look into this. It was the only thing that tipped her off. We hear this from schools a lot. And they claim it's in the name of safety, as if, a parent, if they found out that their child was questioning these things, would beat them or something. And so really to interfere in that relationship between a parent and their child is something that schools should not be doing. But sadly, far too many administrators see it as their role to deprogram students from values that their parents may have at home. And that is not the place of the school. Schools are there in loco parentis, in place of the parents. But when you start to undermine and, contradict that authority, that's when we start to have problems. And I think that's another one of the reasons that we're seeing so many angry parents reach out to us, to other organizations across the country, because they see the school actively working against them rather than in their interest and in their children's best interest.
Okay, I want to draw attention to the website, then we're going to come back. Your website is defendinged.org. It's at the bottom of the screen. And people can go there to find out more information, just to connect with you. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what do parents need to know, how can they get more involved and stay on top of what's going on. Right after this, with Ladies of Another View on Back. Hi, welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Back. And we've been talking with Nicole Neily with the Parents Defending Education, and she always has so much to tell us. We've had her on once before, and I think we'll continue to have her on because we want to know what's going on with education across the country. Welcome back, Nicole.
Thank you.
We have a few more questions, and then we want you to tell us what parents should do to get involved.
Yeah. So how did you start Parents Defending Education? I wasn't on previous shows when you were on here. So kind of what was your driving factor? What got you involved in this?
Sure. So first, I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so, I think for me, just like for many parents, at the beginning of lockdown, it was really kind of an eye-opening experience. I had friends from across the country reach out to me and say, it feels like the schools aren't listening to me. I want the schools to be open. And my husband and I, he's a constitutional litigator, would sort of sit in our backyard and think unfortunately, a lot of the schools, they kind of don't want to listen to you. And we knew that, but I think it was surprising for a lot of families. For me, what flipped the switch was during that summer, I think there was the Wall Street Journal actually ran a profile of a superintendent near where I grew up outside Chicago. And he said he was going to allow Black and brown children back for in-person education before white children because of anti-racism. And I thought, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. But unfortunately, I went to a friend and I said, I want to do what I was doing in higher ed, a group called Speech First. I said, I want to sue these guys. They can't do this. And he said, most people don't know that this is unconstitutional. I think you need to start in a different place. And so we built it out from there. But I think a lot of people having their kids home during COVID and Zoom schooling, it was a really eye-opening experience because so many people had no idea what their children were learning or were not learning. School today is very different than when many of us grew up. And I think that was really shocking for people. And I think it gave a lot of people the incentive to really get more involved and dig in deeper about what's taking place in our schools. And we want to help them with that.
So at a local high school, they brought in a police officer to speak from a police perspective on the George Floyd incident with the students, but the students kind of verbally attacked the officer, and one gal that was especially liberally mean was actually applauded. How did we get there?
Yeah, it's so sad, right? I mean, there is no presumption of goodwill. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of schools, we don't have teachers or administrators that are modeling good behavior. I mean, I remember doing high school debate and you always had to take a position that you didn't agree with. You had to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. But instead now, I mean, incentivized through social media and everything else, we have people who, right, they want the likes, they want, there's kind of the incentive to, own the other side. And it's really, I think, degraded national discourse. And so we have to demand better, not only of our children and our students, but also from our, elected officials and from our teachers and administrators, many of whom pride themselves on expressing, dislike of, the president or something like that. That's not appropriate. These are public institutions paid for with taxpayer dollars, and our children need to be taught how to think, not what to think.
Bingo. Exactly.
I understand last week was BLM week. I didn't even know, but this has apparently been going on for a couple years. What is that all about?
Yes. So Black Lives Matter in School Week happens every year. And so there are for the different grades, there are different activities, but every day has a theme. And there are 13 guiding principles of BLM so that students learn about that, some of which are queer affirming, trans affirming, gender affirming, something about Black families, but it actually advocates for like the abolition of the nuclear family. And so while people think, okay, well, yes, Black Lives Matter sort of writ large, I agree with that idea. The actual things that are being done in our classrooms are appalling. We saw a clip of some kindergartners in an elementary school in Washington, D.C. Somebody sent to us on Friday. And kindergartners were marching back and forth, chanting, Black Lives Matter. These are kids who believe in Santa Claus. I mean, these kids, they did not come up with this activity or this programming on their own. They're being used as political props. And again, we should demand better. What are these children learning or not learning? I mean, what would these children have been doing were it not for this nakedly political activity being done, probably, against the wishes of many families in the school?
Absolutely. So what can parents do, or what is Parents Defending Education doing to stop what is going on, or what can they do?
Sure. So the first part, I think, is for parents to educate themselves about what their rights are. And I realize this is not, I'm married to a constitutional lawyer. Many parents are not as, lucky or unlucky. But I think the first part is to know what your rights are and what your children's rights are. So, if lines are crossed and what to do when those lines are crossed. The next thing I think is to expose it. We need to let people know what's happening in people's backyards across the country, because if you know what's going on, then it gives others reason to act. We have a tip line and we receive between 100 to 200 tips a week from across the country. We vet everything and then we pitch it out to the news so people can talk about it. Because, a lot of people, they might not know how to get something to National Review or Fox News, but we do. And I think, that saying sunshine is the best disinfectant. I very much believe in that. If teachers, if administrators think that what they're handing out, the activities they're doing in class might end up on the news, it's going to make them think twice about the kinds of bombastic and inflammatory activities that they're currently doing. And then the last part is, we encourage people to get engaged. And that can be anything from writing a letter to the editor, sending a tip to us, running for school board, joining the PTA. But That phrase that Dick Armey used to say, politics goes to he who shows up. If you care about schools, if you care about children, if you care about how your tax dollars are spent, you have to show up and you have to do something about it. You can't just moan on Twitter. You actually have to go and show up at the meetings and ask hard questions and be part of this if you want to be, if you want to fix things.
On your website, people are empowered to stand up and speak up. What other things can they do? Is there a place that they can help your organization?
Sure. We have identified at this point over 200 groups from across the country that we have on our map as well on our website. Because we want people to find neighbors, find people in their state, find a tribe. There will be a day when maybe you're a little bit weary and you think, I can't go to the school reading tonight. But if you have a friend in the town next to you who can go in your place, who can watch the Zoom instead, I think it's really important for that sense of community. And we've tried to, we file civil rights complaints with the Federal Department of Education. We file public records requests across the country. If we smell something fishy in a district, we want to know more. We also have helped people to file comments with the Federal Register, which is a confusing process, but it's important. And we also have filed a number of federal lawsuits to hold schools accountable for their unconstitutional behavior.
Nellie, can you tell me about some of your successes? I know you've had many.
Sure. We just actually settled a lawsuit against Wellesley Public Schools in Massachusetts this week, which we're very proud of. We sued that district because they maintained a racially segregated affinity group policy. So they had groups, events for minority students, but they actually explicitly told white students that they were not allowed to go. You can't do that under both the Civil Rights Act as well as the 14th Amendment. You cannot treat students differently on the basis of race. And so we thought that it was important to set that precedent and to sue that school and let that school, as well as others around the country, know you may not do this and you will be held accountable. They also had a speech policy where they were discriminating against students on the kinds of speech that they were expressing and encouraging students to rat on each other. And so we called that out for being a violation of the First Amendment. And we settled. So we're very pleased with that.
Excellent.
How helpful is it having your husband there with you? I mean, being a constitutional lawyer, how important is that?
It's, I call him my in-home counsel. I don't think he thinks that's very funny, but I do. I work with an outside law firm, but it's good just to have a gut check. And I think, what I have found through this work is, through the course of my career, having a supportive partner is really helpful. I mean, trying as I travel, as I fundraise, but then also just you have a rough day and having somebody who gets you and wants to support what you're doing. He has litigated a number of high-profile constitutional cases. And so he gets the temporary setbacks, but also the victories. So it's been really helpful. Yeah. So I'm a fan.
Yeah, and
Perfect match.
It really is about our legal rights, and that's what's being trampled on all along. And so we need people like you. And once again, I want people to go to your website, defendinged.org. There's so much information. The tip line is there, and you'll just be inspired to get involved too. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.